week 13 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers this week. The first one, the New York Jets. So I know the Jets, they're one of the worst teams in the league, but their defense has shown up and played decently from time to time this year. The last few games of them, week 10 versus Buffalo, I know 45 points allowed, 2 sacks and a fumble recovery. Week 11 versus Miami, not totally horrible, 24 points allowed and an into. And then last week at Houston, who I know is a weak team and really can't do much, 14 points allowed, 5 sacks and an into. So right here, week 13 versus Philly, I know the Eagles give up the 10th least amount of fantasy points to defenses on the season, but I think the Jets here could keep this game close a little in the beginning and maybe make a few plays on Jalen Hurts, because last week Jalen Hurts versus a mediocre defense in the New York Giants, he didn't look good at all. He threw 3 interceptions, and he's coming banged up into this one as well. So if the Jets could get some pressure with the home crowd behind them, maybe this defense could put up a decent fantasy game, anywhere from 6 to 10 points. But it's a long shot, but this is why they consider it a sleeper, and they're available in 99% of fantasy leagues. The next DST is the Las Vegas Raiders. So the Raiders, their defense really hasn't been good this season. They're available in 92% of fantasy leagues, and they just gave up 33 points to the Dallas Cowboys, even though we know the Cowboys are one of the best offenses in the league. But this week it's a pretty decent matchup versus the Washington football team that gives up the 8th most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few games here for the Vegas Raiders, week 10 versus Kansas City, 41 points allowed, a fumble recovery. Week 11 versus Cincinnati, 32 points allowed, but 3 sacks and a fumble recovery. And then last week versus the Cowboys, 33 points allowed and a sack, but hey, their offense got the job done and won a crazy shootout on Thanksgiving Day here. So I think in this one, they can make some plays on Heineke. Heineke ain't the greatest of quarterbacks, even though I have him as a sleeper as well. But I could see this being a weird game where a lot of people in this one have good fantasy games. So I could see the defense doing good for the Raiders, get maybe 7-8 fantasy points, and I could see Heineke getting 20 plus fantasy points. But either way, I think the Raiders are a decent sleeper option this week. And the third and final defense I have as a sleeper is the New York Giants. So the Giants last week played good defense versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Giants, we've seen flashes this season from them where they've played decent football games on defense. And this week they do versus the Dolphins in Miami that give up the 9th most fantasy points to defenses. So it's not far-fetched that this defense can maybe make some plays. Week 9 versus Vegas, 16 points allowed, a sack, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown in that one. Week 11 at Tampa, very tough matchup, 30 points allowed, a sack, and an into. And then last week, like I mentioned, versus Philly, a great fantasy day for them with 13 fantasy points, 7 points allowed, a sack, 3 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. So I think they could get to Tua a few times in this one. And Tua hasn't been all that great, even though this Dolphin team has won 4 games in a row. But I think this game's going to be a dogfight, and I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring considering NFL standards. So I think the Giants could be a decent DST unit this week. So that's a few defenses I have as sleepers for week 13 of the fantasy football season.